Check now the best anti-stress solution for your everyday life. Click the link in the description for your anti-stress solution.
France watches skies for Russian wargames, domestic drone threat. From close-up encounters with Russian warplanes to the threat of attacks from lightweight drones, France's Air Force is on alert on two fronts as it confronts a return to Cold War shadowboxing and heightened domestic security concerns. In the latest alert involving European airspace, the French Air Force said on Thursday two Mirage combat jets and one Rafale had escorted the two bombers down the French coast before handing over to Spanish military planes. Britain said it had also scrambled Typhoon jets to monitor two Russian Blackjack bombers which flew near British airspace. Despite daily cat-and-mouse games between Western and Russian warplanes over the Baltic Sea, and regular reports of attempts by Russian jets to test reaction times of UK defences, such contacts remain less frequent around France airspace. A French official said the incident was the fourth time Russian fighters had been intercepted on the French coast over the past 2 years, a period of tension between Russia and Western Europe related to the conflicts in Syria and Ukraine. At a command center deep under Mount Verdun in southeastern France, French Air Force officials are monitoring what is happening further north and are ready to respond. We detect the Russian planes relatively early because we are integrated in the NATO military structure, Brigadier General Pascal Delors told Reuters inside the control room, reached through a warren of tunnels protected by thick doors. We know at least 5 or 6 hours before they have any chance of reaching the French coast, which allows us to deploy our resources accordingly, he said. According to French officials, Russian bombers take a different route each time, sometimes flying as far south as Gibraltar before turning back, or drawing a wide circle from St. Petersburg through Scandinavia, the west of Ireland, Gibraltar, Syria and back to Russia over the Caspian Sea. France has 8 Rafale or Mirage fighters and 5 helicopters deployed 24 hours a day on quick reaction alert. At the same time, the French Air Force carries out regular simulations and monitors potential threats from private planes or drones in its domestic airspace, amid heightened security in the country since the Paris attacks of 2015. The goal is to create a web of surveillance so that no aircraft be either inside French airspace or approaching it without being identified and having its posture checked, said Yannick, a captain who can only be identified by his first name. Recent reports that Islamic State has used drones to scout targets or launch attacks in Iraq or Syria have heightened awareness of the threat from unmanned vehicles. The fact that they can take off close to the actual target which they could be aiming gives you a short reaction time, even if the threat is a small-scale one, said Philippe Adam. France says it is ready to use jamming or GPS blocking equipment, and even a squadron of force. Wall Street hits records again, boosted by Trump economy hopes. Wall Street's main stock indexes rose to fresh all-time closing highs as a spike in oil prices supported energy shares and investors renewed their optimism about President Donald Trump's economic agenda. The S&P 500 tallied its 4th straight session of gains, a day after Trump vowed a major tax announcement in the next few weeks. The benchmark S&P 500 has surged 8.3% since Trump's November 8 election, fueled by expectations he will lower corporate taxes, reduce regulations and increase infrastructure spending. The rally had stalled amid concerns over Trump's protectionist stance and lack of clarity on policy reforms. Investors were worried that the administration may have gotten off track and was pursuing other items, said Kim Forrest, senior equity research analyst at Fort Pitt Capital Group in Pittsburgh. Tax cuts have gotten put back on the front burner, Forrest said, adding, "We are looking for gains in the economy at large from this, not just earnings per share, gains in stocks." The Dow Jones Industrial Average DJI rose 96.97 points, or 0.48%, to 20,269.37. The S&P 500 SPX gained 8.23 points, or 0.36%, to 2,316.1 and the Nasdaq Composite ICE added 18.95 points, or 0.33%, to 5,734.13. The S&P and Dow closed at a record high for a second straight session, while the Nasdaq extended its streak of record closes to a fourth day. Energy shares. SPNY gained 0.8%. Oil prices rose more than 1% after reports that OPEC members delivered more than 90% of the output cuts they pledged in a landmark deal that took effect in January. The S&P financial sector. SPSY ended up 0.2%. The group initially moved higher after Daniel Tarlow, the top Federal Reserve official charged with financial regulation, said he would resign, creating further room for Trump to reshape the Fed's policy-making staff. The focus on Washington comes as large U.S. companies were set for their second straight quarter of profit increases after several periods of declines. With more than 70% of the S&P 500 having reported results, fourth quarter earnings are on track to have climbed 8.4%, which would be the best performance since the third quarter of 2014, according to Thomson Reuters I/B/E/S. "We are seeing a pretty solid rate of beats and we're out of the earnings recession," said Jason Ware, Chief Investment Officer at Albion Financial Group in Salt Lake City. Activision Blizzard, ATV.to, surged 18.9% after the video game publisher reported higher than expected revenue and set a $1 billion share buyback program. Its shares gave the biggest boost to the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq. Skechers USA, SKX.N, jumped 19.3% after the footwear maker's fourth quarter revenue beat expectations. Sears Holding, SHLD.to, soared 25.6% after the struggling retailer said it would cut costs by $1 billion and reduce debt and pension obligations by at least $1.5 billion this year. Advancing issues outnumbered declining ones on the NYSE by a 2.60 to 1 ratio. On Nasdaq, a 2.05 to 1 ratio favored advancers. The S&P 500 posted 48 new 52-week Trump tax cut talk, China data spur risk rally. A key index of global equity markets rose to a 20-month high on Friday, with Wall Street shares hitting records for a second straight day, as investors continued to bask in the afterglow of U.S. President Donald Trump's promise of tax reform. The dollar hovered near an 11-day high against a basket of major rivals, as Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe opened 2 days of talks looking to cement a decades-old alliance. The MSCI's World Index, which tracks shares in 46 countries, rose after evidence of Chinese growth lifted shares in Asia and Europe. Strength on Wall Street boosted the index further and it was up 0.41% to the highest since May 2015. Trump's promise of a phenomenal tax plan helped reignite a post-election rally in stocks, which had stalled in recent weeks on concerns over his protectionist stand and the lack of clarity on policy reforms. Investors were worried that the administration may have gotten off track and was pursuing other items, said Kim Forrest, senior equity research analyst at Fort Pitt Capital Group in Pittsburgh. Tax cuts have gotten put back on the front burner, Forrest said, adding, "We are looking for gains in the economy at large from this, not just earnings per share gains in stocks." The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 96.97 points, or 0.48%, to finish at 20,269.37. The S&P 500 gained 8.23 points, or 0.36%, to close at 2,316.10, and the Nasdaq Composite added 18.95 points, or 0.33%, to end at 5,734.13. The ongoing corporate earnings season added to the upbeat mood. Activision Blizzard's shares surged nearly 19% to give the biggest boost to the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq, after the video game publisher reported higher than expected revenue on Thursday. In Europe, shares edged higher, ending the week in positive territory thanks to corporate earnings and robust basic resources stocks. Europe's broad FTSE First 300 index closed up 0.15% at 1,448.70. The US dollar held its recent gains against a basket of major rivals as comments from Trump during a news conference with the Japanese Prime Minister did little to shake optimism his administration would overhaul tax policy soon. The underlying bigger story in the last 24 hours is that Trump has put the reflation trade back on the front foot by talking about a tremendous tax program, said Richard Franulovich, a senior currency strategist at Westpac Banking Corp in New York. The dollar index, which measures the greenback against 6 major rivals, was up 0.12% to 100.77. In bond markets, U.S. Treasury debt yields edged higher, boosted by solid monthly import price data as investors acted largely on technical data. Technical positioning and limited trading volume shifted markets through the day as a weak reading on U.S. consumer confidence forced traders to re-examine the market's momentum. Benchmark 10-year U.S. Treasury note yields were down 3/32 and price to yield 2.406%, up from a yield of 2.397, late on Thursday. Oil prices rose after reports that OPEC members delivered more than 90% of the output cuts they pledged in a deal that took effect in January. Brent crude settled up $1.07, or 1.92%, at $56.70 a barrel, and U.S. crude settled up 86 cents, or.
If you like to receive more news on our YouTube channel, please click the subscribe button. If you like to receive an alert every time a new upload is made, hit the bell. Give us a like to the video or dislike if you agree or not to the news. Be proactive. Is your life and the news will serve your day. Finally, leave us your opinion in the comment section on what you think about the subject. Thank you and stay tuned to Breaking News 24.